Hi, guys, and welcome to this episode of Taste of Premiere. Guess what season it is? Hey, guys, and welcome to the show. We've got a pretty cool one today. I've got Stephen Matthews with us, and Stephen is a DSE. In fact, he's my DSE. He works with me on NASA and FMC. And he's a friggin' PowerShell genius. And it's our pleasure to have him. Stephen, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for that intro.
Yeah.
Setting the bar pretty high.
Yeah, I mean every word of it, though. I mean, I've seen you do some pretty cool stuff with PowerShell, and I'm just amazed by it. And I think PowerShell is probably one of the coolest, most powerful tools that we have in our tools arsenal. And so I'm excited about today's show.
Yeah, it's definitely my favorite tool.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so talk to us a little bit about what you're going to show us today.
All right, what I want to show you is just the basics of finding PowerShell, where it is, and going through how to find the commands from the old command prompt, where they're at in PowerShell, and then exploring commandlets and finding more commands to start using to really just expand your inventory on the commands and how to go about finding more of them. And then we'll talk a little bit about the difference between PowerShell version 2 and 3 and and the reason upgrading is important.
Awesome. All right, well, let's kick it off. Let's get started.
All right, so people ask me how I got started with PowerShell, and really it started with a conscious decision on my part a few years ago to stop using the GUI and to just start using PowerShell and see how far I could get. And it took a lot of time, a lot of investment. It took a long time to learn a lot of searching for how to build commands and how to pipe them together and do that. But what I found was, as I learned more, the skills I learned, 4 versions ago of PowerShell are still applicable today. And so that's how I kind of built upon it. And one of the first points when I realized I got pretty good at it was I was working with a Linux engineer. We shared an office in another life, and a user came in to get an account created. So I opened up PowerShell, and I had the Active Directory module. I created him an account right in PowerShell. The user left, and my Linux admin, he's like, "Hey, did you create that account?" I was like, "Sure did." And he goes, "Why?" He's like, "How? I didn't see you open the GUI." And I said, "I use PowerShell." And he's like, "Wow, I didn't even know Windows could do that." And so at that point, I really got excited and felt like, I can start using this as my regular tool. And so when I go onto these customer sites, what I find is people think that PowerShell isn't on their systems, that it's been removed from their corporate build, or that it just doesn't exist or it's not accessible to them. So I want to tell you that PowerShell started shipping, or it was created in 2006, and it shipped with Windows 7. So the odds are that it's there, and removing PowerShell is about as hard as removing the command prompt. So we're going to talk about some of the ways to find it. Usually if I go to a new system, I'll open up the search window and I'll type in PowerShell, and usually it'll come up here. There's ICE and some of the other modules I have. I have the Active Directory module, I have the Azure module. And then you can also do the Windows R for the run box, and you hit PowerShell there. It'll pop up because it's in the System32. I'm going to throw an exit command in there to get rid of this window. And then it's also, by default, it's in your Start menu. So if you go to your Start menu and Programs, Windows PowerShell. Now this Start menu folder has a space in it. I want you to pay attention to that. Here's your different executables. You notice that there's ICE and there's PowerShell, and then there's x86 versions as well. And then, of course, the actual PS home. This is a variable, and this is where it exists in the System32, Windows PowerShell version 1.0. Don't worry about that 1.0. It hasn't changed in the 5 versions I've had it. This Windows PowerShell, though, there is no space in that directory, so it can throw people off. And again, here's your exe and your ICE. What I'll do is I'll right-click it and I'll pin it to my taskbar on a new machine. So what I have open right now is ICE. Yours may look a little different when you open it. It may look something similar to this with the command add-on on the right and the window split top and bottom. So this is your script pane, this is your output pane, and then the add-ons will pop up on the right. And this is just really, user preference. But what I like to do is I like to set it up with the script pane on the right and get rid of that command window. I'll show you how to search for commands without using that. Yours may look a little different if you have an older version. This output window may be split into two, where there's a blue window up top, which is your output, and then like a lighter white window down here, which is your prompt. In later versions, they combined it into one version here. Now, the only way you'll know that you're in PowerShell is there's this PS prompt here that prepends where you're at. So I'm going to bring up a command prompt. And so this, since I'm using ICE here, I just want to show you some things. These are all individual commands on each line, and then you'll see me highlight some, and I'll be pressing F8 or this little run button here, run selection, and that just runs line one at a time. And that's how I'm going to step through this demo. So if I bring up command prompt here, this is a regular command prompt, and you'll see that I'm in a default directory here. And if I type in PowerShell, I'm going to throw a no profile switch on there because my profile is customized. I don't want it to clear out anything. The only way you're going to know that you're in a PowerShell profile is this PS is going to prepend it. Of course, if you don't see the branding, if somebody has a script that starts with command, opens PowerShell, and does a clear screen, you won't know that it's running in PowerShell unless you see that PS. So I'm going to throw the exit command in there, which is the same command that the command prompt uses. And so, exit's a nice familiar command from the command prompt days. What that is that's actually an alias, and the aliases are how you're going to find out what commandlets to start using to replace your old DOS commands. So
Hey, hold on just a second. I noticed you're doing something really cool there, and that is you're clicking on things that are defined in the scripting window, and it's actually bringing up items in the command prompt window. Like you just clicked on get alias, and it automatically got all of the aliases and displayed them in the PS window and in the command prompt window.
Yeah, so these are all individual. These are all commandlets. The blue are commandlets. This earthy color here, this maroon, is strings. Your red or orange is your environmental variable. So that's one of the nice things about ICE is that it's color-coded like that, so you know where you're at. And so each one of these lines executes as a one-liner, as they say. And usually I'm pressing the F8, which automatically highlights it, throws it over to the output, and it runs the command.
Yeah, so if you were to click on get command, would we see all the commands?
Yep, yeah, you will. I'll get there.
That's awesome.
Yep. All right, so now going back to the aliases here, this shows you that these are the shortcut. The aliases are a shortcut, so you don't have to type out the entire commandlet. So some of the ones should look familiar here. dir, which is actually get child item, so you're only typing 3 letters as opposed to that whole command. And then you got set, which is the old, how to set variables in the command environment. That's actually now the aptly named set variable. One I want to point out here in particular is this little one-line script here. I found all the aliases that have that resolve to remove item, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 aliases that all resolve to this one command. So PowerShell has done a lot with their commandlets to reduce the number of commands you have to remember. So that's how I want you to start expanding your commandlet inventory. And now if you want to find all the commandlets that you have once you get comfortable with the aliases, because that's what this is all about. I want you guys as admins to be as comfortable in PowerShell as you are in the command prompt and DOS and bash scripting, because this is the standard of our command-based administration. So now git command is going to go through, and it's going to go through all the modules that I have on my system, and I'll put all the commands. And you look here on the right, it's kind of cut off. These are your source. This tells you what directory or what module is loaded from. So beginning was Azure, some DHCP, DNS, some of the other modules that I have loaded on my system. And I'm going to go ahead and cut that off because, as you can see, we're only in the Ds. It's got a while to go. To stop it, Control-C, that's your stop, or you can press this little red button while it's running. The only way, and down here on the left, that's where you'll know what the status of your script is. And of course, if you got the prompt. If the prompt's not there and it's saying stopping, you just got to wait until it's done. So now we want to see, what modules we have available. So now the get module list available is going to search my system again, but it's just looking for the modules. And the modules are what holds all the commands. Say there's a module that you have on another system that you don't have on this system, and maybe you're in an environment where you can't download things directly from the internet, and it's just you have to go through a lot of paperwork to do that. You can actually copy modules from one system to another. So you go to an area, a system that has the module you want, such as like this Azure module here. And let's see here. It didn't pop up what I was expecting it to do. Let me import the module and make sure it's loaded. So importing a module is how you load all the commandlets from a module into your session. In later versions of PowerShell, it should load those automatically when you run a command, and it finds the module in there. It usually does that on the back end, but sometimes you have to manually do it. So now that I got the module in there, now I'm using the up and down arrow that shows that's your history of what you type. It's not going to show up anything that you run from the script. So let's go ahead and run that command again from the script. And so what the get module does is it gets all the information for that module. It doesn't get the commands, but just the properties of that individual module. And then I did a select object, which would show me all the properties that are available to it. And I know I want to look for the path. So this module path right here is under my Windows System 32 PowerShell version 1.0 modules right there. So you could copy the root folder of that Azure, and copy that folder to another machine and put it in their modules folder. And when you do a get module list available, it'll be there and you can import it. And that's how easy it is to move modules around machines.
So do all modules end with PSD1? Is that the...
They should, and most do. However, there are some modules that are just functions, that are really advanced functions, but they call them modules. They could be manifests and even aliases, depending on just how they're built. But the properly built ones should end with a PSD1.
Okay, so let's just to make things simple. A module is essentially a big box that contains a bunch of PowerShell commands.
Yeah, usually it's centered around a piece of software or a specific purpose. Like you have Azure commandlets, you have Active Directory commandlets. So all those commandlets for Active Directory, they put them up into they combine them all into a module and distribute it that way. Think of it as like a zip file full of commands.
So I install application A, and it automatically puts its PowerShell module in, if it has one, in the modules directory. Is that the way it works? It
should, but some don't. Some put them in. Let's see here. Some put them in the program files directory along with the rest of the software. The safest place to put it, though, is in the PowerShell 1.0 modules directory. Now, I'm going to show you here this PS module path directory, or variable. That's why it's orange. This shows you all the default directories where it'll search. And this output's kind of choppy, so it looks like it's a bunch of strings put together. And I'm going to check to make sure that this object is a string by using a get member. So if you run the output of a variable through this get member, it'll tell you how it's encoded. In this case, it is a system string, and the system string has all these methods, which are ways you can interact with the string. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a split command, which uses a particular character as a separator. And in this case, it's going to be the semicolon. And so these are the default paths where the Git module is going to look. So if a module is anywhere in these directories or nested below it, it'll find it. And you can edit this. You can add your own paths to it as well. Like this command right here, I'm doing a plus equals operator, and I'm adding my own directory, and I'm throwing the semicolon in there to prepend it to make sure that it formats correctly with the rest of it. And then I run it again, and now there's that C program files in there, just the root of that. All right. So
cool.
So now we're going to go on to I want to show you the commands that are in the module Azure. So I had an issue where I was trying to convert I was trying to upload my VHDs to Azure because I was using my cloud subscription there, and I couldn't find the command to convert my VHDXs to VHDs before I uploaded it. And I was doing this git command module Azure. I couldn't find the convert, couldn't find it. It's because it's not in this module. It's actually in the Hyper-V module. So, and that's some of the things you gotta realize. But what was in the Azure was the add VHD disk, which is the command I needed to actually do the upload, not necessarily the convert. So I'm going to show you how to search for commands in a little bit. But let's talk about the PowerShell version that we have. The easiest way to find out what version of PowerShell you have is to run this git host command. And I'll put out the version right there. I'm running 5.0, running the production preview, even though the RTM just got released. I haven't gotten around to installing it. So that's just the basic version info. There's more version info in a variable called version table. And there's this particular commandlet that will show you what will allow you to interact with the variables. But I'm not going to tell you what it is. Let's do a search and see if we can find it. If you do a git help variable, usually that second that parameter, or in this case variable, it will do a search. It'll go through all the commandlets and all the modules, and it'll pull up all the commands that have that word in there. It didn't work in this particular case because variable is actually a provider. So it has its own definition. So if git help can't help you, you can use the git command. Now, git command here, it's going to output. I'm not going to run the whole thing because it took a while, but I'm going to do a measure object. And this will tell you how many commandlets that you have to look for to find the one that works with variables.
This is really cool, man.
Yeah. So it looks like I don't know how much time I'm going to give it here, but on my particular system, because I have more than just the vanilla PowerShell, I got the Azure commandlets, I got the RSAT tools, which has Active Directory commandlets and a few other things. I have about 3,700 commandlets to run, to look for, to find a commandlet that works with variables. Now, I just happen to know that the command I want to use is in the Windows PowerShell utility. So if you know what module it's in, you can actually see here it's stopping, and I don't have my prompt. That's how you know that you have to wait. And I can do a measure object there, and cutting it down to that particular module brings it down to about 100 some commandlets to look for. But the best way to search for commandlet, if you don't have git help, is to use the git command. Now, the git command, that's that same command we've been talking about. It's got a noun parameter, which will search for the second half of the commandlet name. So the commandlets start with a verb dash singular noun, and that's how they're built. And there's a list of approved verbs. You can run git verb, and this will show you the list of the verbs that have been approved by the PowerShell team to use in in the environment. And that is the verbs you'll be using when you start building your own functions and naming your own script. You want to get into a habit of using those approved verbs. And they have different categories of the verbs. Some are common, like get, set, show. And then some are more specific, like connect, which is actually under the communications group. So if you're trying to join two strings together and you wrote a script that does that, you don't want to call it connect because it's got the wrong connotation. Connect would be something where you're testing connectivity to a remote resource. You would want to use the join verb, which is under the common category.
And so why is that? Why would join be better than connect? Is it just syntax or?
It has nothing to do with the syntax. It's just it provides a common reference point for the entire PowerShell community. If I see a command, if I see a custom script somebody wrote that starts with connect, I can automatically assume that it probably has to do with remote connectivity to another resource. As opposed to if I see something that says join, I know that it's probably working with strings to do whatever the commandlet does.
Makes sense.
I was talking about the get command that with the noun parameter, and we're putting the variable word in there. So now it's going to search for all the commands with the second half, the noun, that has the word variable in it. And I'm not going to let that finish, but it comes up with 5. So you go from 3700 to 109 in the module to 5 if you use this get command with the noun. And get command also has the parameter verb. So if you want to find all the get commands or all the set commands, you can do it. You can use that too. All right, so if we found the command that we want to do, get variable. This shows all the variables that are currently defined in this session, and these are the names of them. Now, the one we're looking for to find out more information about PowerShell version is PS version table, and you can see that right here, PS version table. And then you see that it's got this. It's got these curly braces. Curly braces tell you that the information in it is a hash table, which means it's got a bunch of properties, and the properties themselves have values. So if we do a get variable on that name, just to pull that one out, so get variable name PS version table, it returns just that one variable of all the variables that are defined, but the value is still in this hash table, format. So what we can do is we can look for a parameter inside the get variable to see if there's something that will help with that. So if I run a get help, you can run a get help and then a get variable, or the commandlet that you're looking at, and it has a few switches. The ones you'll probably use the most is full, which will put out all the information, description information, all the parameters, and all the examples. And then you can put a couple of localized parameters, such as examples, which will just show you the examples of how to use that commandlet, and then the parameter function, which is what I put in here. And this will show you all the parameters that this particular command uses. So things like exclude, include, a few other things. And then when we go down here, we see there's a value only. It gets only the value of the variable, which that sounds exactly what we want. So now we've built this commandlet out. We went from get variable to get variable name PS version table to value only, and it returns that information. So that is the proper way to go and find your variables. Now, variables in PowerShell are defined with the $sign. And so you can call it directly by just typing $variable, and it's the same information. And you can also set your own custom variables using the equals operator right here. So I'm going to set my variable foo to bar, and then we'll run a get variable on it. And there it is, foobar, right there. And I just defined my own variable. Now, so these are the variables that are in this session. Now there's environmental variables, and the environmental variables are in a different place. It's actually in a PS drive called env. So if we do a get PS drive, this will show you all the different PowerShell or provider drives that PowerShell knows of. and you can use get child item and file system type commandlets to access these systems. So there's alias, which I showed you, the get alias. You can do a get child item on the alias instead of just get alias. I don't put out the same information. env, that will show you all the environmental variables, and then functions. And look at these, HKCU and HKLM, you recognize those? Those are registry entries. So you can actually search the system from PowerShell command prompt. You can search the registry. And so let's take a look at the environmental variables. env colon, and this will put out all the environmental variables of this system. And this will put out the same information that's in the old set command for
DOS.
for commandlet, or for a command prompt.
Yeah.
All right, so here are all the all the environmental variables that are under that env PS drive. So these should look very familiar. They're all the same ones from the set command from the command prompt. You have your user DNS domain, your username, your user profile, a couple other things, home drive, home path. And just to check, we're going to do a command/c set. So what this will do is, if you just type set in PowerShell, it'll automatically search the aliases first, and then its commandlets, and then it will finally go back to and look for an executable. So if I was just to type set, which is the old command prompt for displaying the variables, it's actually going to default in PowerShell to using the set variable command, which is the alias set is for. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw command/c in front of it, which tells it to run it as a command from the command prompt. And as you can see, it puts out the same information.
Oh, that's really cool. Hang on just a second. So that's kind of neat. So I can throw CMD in front of anything, and it'll just launch the command prompt command?
Yeah, command, the /c, and then the command.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep. And so I'm just going to compare the two real quick. This should show me we got 46 in the first one, the get child item env, and then we have 47 in the command/c. So there's one variable that's different between the two. And so you can do that with all those PS drives. So I got a little one-liner here for the get PS drive. And what it's going to do is for each one of those PS drives, it's going to display the name, which is going to be right here. And then it's going to get one item from that and display it. So the first one it did, the first PS drive here is alias. The first alias command is the %, which translates the for each. The next one it did was the file system, I believe. Yep, C drive. And the first item in there was my modules directory. And then it went in and found a cert under my cert, and found the first environmental variable, which is the all users profile, and HKCU and HKLM, the first registry entries in there. So that's using the get child item and then you put in the PS drive : / and your path. And you can start getting it. You can access the registry commands directly from the command line. All right, so now I want to talk to you about...
that's awesome.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about the versions between the PowerShell versions, which is so aptly important considering that PowerShell 5 just went RTM. So I wrote a custom script here, which you won't see because it's in my own personal directory called compare PS version. And I want to compare version 2 and 3. What it's going to do is it's going to pop up two windows, run a bunch of commands, and then I'm going to point out the information between them. All right, so on the left here, I have a separate PowerShell window, which is running version 2. And on the right here, I couldn't get my version 3 to start, so this is actually my ICE PowerShell, which is version 5. So I would just want to point out the difference here. You can tell that this is running version 2, and I specified that with the start command PowerShell, when you start PowerShell, you can throw a couple switches on. I showed you the no profile before. You can also throw a dash version 2, 3, 4, 5, and that will start in that version. So this one started with the dash version 2. And you can go in here and you can look at the PS version table, and you'll see that you're all in the 2s, the version, the stacked version, and the remoting. Mine over here is going to have the 5s, which you saw earlier. And then some of the things we're going to look at here. I'm not going to run it because the commands don't seem to come back right now. But the get module list available all, it returns about 6,700 modules. And that's not just modules. That's, like I said, it's modules, functions, and a few other things, and individual scripts. And then the get command only returns 410. On my version 3 and 5, it returns 3,700. So that shows you the difference in some of the back-end stuff when you run a get command. PowerShell version, starting with version 3, will go through all those modules, pull out all those commands automatically. And now I wanted to show you some of the formatting that happens here, the difference between 2 and 3. So if I'm on 2 here and I do a get command, I have my tab completion. And I have tab completion for the property too. And I know the property I want to use is count, but count does not tab complete, so I have to put that in manually. Now, starting with version 3, you get the color-coded this color-coded syntax. So if I start typing over here,
it's like a light blue.
Yeah, it's a light blue. Measure object, and then select object. Yeah, these are all commandlets, so they're all blue. But when I get to the property, you'll see that it turns yellow in this particular instance. And my tab complete's not working right now. You can see it running down here. It does a combination of IntelliSense and tab completion, so sometimes it takes a little bit of time for it to figure out exactly what it's trying to do. So there's my tab completion. And the other thing that's interesting in ICE is it also tab completes the actual property names that are available. So I can just do tab, and it will automatically show me all the available properties, which you don't get in PowerShell version 2. And so the other thing here, actually let me kill that. I don't want that to run. If you see how in my command here, my measure object isn't capitalized, if I go back and I hit tab, it will automatically capitalize that, but it gets rid of the rest of my command, which, you lose all that writing. When you get to PowerShell version 3, it keeps that information. It will make the edits and capitalize measure object in this case, but it will keep the rest of the line. So that's some of the formatting changes that are different. Some of the other things that are different are there's hidden parameters and switches that get added to commandlets that you don't see. So get child item, if it's a dir for a directory, there's a dash hidden switch in the newer versions. I don't know where it changed, and it will only return the hidden files. All right, and as you can see with the get child item, the dash hidden switch didn't exist on the PowerShell version 2, whereas here on my version 5, I do have that switch. So they're constantly upgrading the modules and the commandlets themselves, and you won't find that hidden switch in the help or the online help either. So it's important to keep up to date as much as you can while people are out there building scripts for their modules and stuff, to make sure that you're up to date and you're not trying to run a script that has an unknown dependency on a variable or switch parameter that came in an updated commandlet.
Yeah, so that's cool. So hey, let me ask you a question. What version of PowerShell ships with Windows 10?
So PowerShell version 2 shipped with Windows 7 and 2008 R2. PowerShell 3 shipped with Windows 8.1 and Server 2012.
Okay. All right, but
And
we're
so
in
now
like,
with the Windows as a service, with the updates, you should have an up-to-date PowerShell once you go to Windows 10 because it should just come as a Windows update.
okay, and so that'll bring you up to 5?
It could, yeah. I didn't actually do any updates. I started with an 8.1 computer, and then when we migrated it to 10, I started getting the updates, and I'm up to PowerShell version 5 now.
Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. All right. Well, so this is really interesting stuff. I want to remind everybody that really today all we're doing is just kind of showing you the interface, showing you some basic commands, showing you kind of what some of the differences are between the different versions of PowerShell. You can catch everything, go back and watch it again, but it's not critical. We're going to have Stephen back, and he's going to actually walk us through creating some PowerShell scripts, and that ought to be really, really cool and interesting, and I just can't wait for that. Stephen, thank you for doing this for us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and I hope to, I just want you guys to get your confidence up with PowerShell and to start using it so I can see more PowerShell scripts out in the wild.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm really excited. Let me just back up a little bit. I was on site with my customer, and Stephen came on site with my customer, and they had, 4 or 5 nagging issues that I think you came in and wiped out with PowerShell scripts in like 20 minutes. So it is a very, very powerful tool. It's amazing the things that you can get done via PowerShell, and I'm hoping, like Stephen, that everybody gives it a shot. There are a couple of books that I've looked at. There's a pretty good Learn PowerShell in 24 Hours book that I picked up at a bookstore. I'm not going to say the name because we can't we can't give props to one over another. But really in any bookstore you can find lots of PowerShell documentation, lots of books. On the internet there's plenty of PowerShell documentation. Is there a specific site that you like to send people to, Stephen?
The scripting guys. And Ed Wilson keeps that site going with multiple posts a day sometimes, so there's plenty to read. And there's mailbag items too where people ask questions and they give simple answers to common questions.
Awesome. And we'll throw a page up that has that link. But if you don't want to wait for that, you can certainly just go to Bing and type in the scripting guys, and you'll immediately get a link to that site. All right, so I can't wait for episode 2 or part 2 of this. Thanks again. I really appreciate you being on. And guys, that's your Taste of Premiere.